Steve Richards, are you surprised by the success of the podcast Rock and Roll Politics?
No, because, the podcast actually followed the live shows. I've been doing the live shows for a long time. And it was clear to me that there was a real hunger for the sort of crazy world of British politics to kind of be explored in more depth than you get, say, on the BBC, where, quite often I would experience as a pundit being invited onto the Radio 4's Today programme. And they say, oh, yeah, come on, it'll be the last item, 5 to 9. And in reality, it was 3 minutes to 9. And you were sort of discussing the entire future of the Conservative Party, say. And you'd be there with two others, and you get about 30 seconds each. And it's just not long enough to kind of try and make sense of the crazy things that are happening in politics. And that's been the case for some time, the craziness. So, no, I think there is a real yearning for more depth, but for the depth to be done in a conversational way, not in a kind of heavy way. And I think that explains the appeal of the podcast and the live shows.
So in many ways, some of us go back quite a way back to something like Brian Walden's Weekend World, an hour of hearing and listening to another politician being challenged, and it's long form. And it's that's what people make. Stuff like, I know yours is very different, but we want an hour. We want an hour and a half, 2 hours, don't we?
Yeah, we need space. And I'm obsessed by this, Again, to go back to the BBC, which I've got a lot of time for and work for, but managers have endless meetings about how to make things more interesting. They could do a very simple thing: allow politics to breathe a bit, because only then do you get a sense of the dramas and the characters and why things are happening. I'm a big fan of sort of looking at why we've had so many prime ministers suddenly. It doesn't happen by chance. There are always reasons. And you're right. It just needs time. We need time. And you can't do it in 3 minutes. To be honest, you can't do it in 10 minutes. And that's the joy of the stage and podcasts.
And so you mentioned the word craziness. Could you tell me, when do you think this craziness began?
I think you can measure it back, actually, to the financial crash of 2008, where all kinds of issues arose, and then Britain in 2010 got a coalition. It doesn't usually have a coalition kind of government at Westminster anyway. Then we got sort of the rise of the SNP, the rise of Jeremy Corbyn. Then we had Brexit. Then we had the global pandemic, and all these things have thrown up challenges which the main parties have really struggled to meet, and odd personalities ending up in number 10, who in previous eras wouldn't get near number 10. They wouldn't get near a parish council. But I think you can sort of go back to 2008 as a starting point for the current modern craziness.
And in you're coming to Edinburgh Fringe with Rock and Roll Politics, do you offer any solutions, so to speak? Because you mentioned about people needing to get onto a parish council. So how do we get a better calibre of politician, and what solutions could you suggest?
Well, that's a good question, because I'm going to claim that each show is going to be different. And I think that I'm going to be doing 14 shows. And it will be like a box set. And that if by the end, the last show will have cracked it and made sense of the madness. But last year I made a similar claim, and I did 14 different shows, and incidentally, a completely different context. Boris Johnson was still Prime Minister. People were waiting for Liz Truss, and we all know what followed. And an American couple last August came to every single show. And at the end, I felt I got to know them by the end. I said, so have we cracked it then? You followed the whole box set. And without hesitation, the guy looked up and said, no. So it's actually, what you can do is delve deep and try. So, for example, this August, what the heck is happening? A year ago, Johnson was still in charge. We've now onto the third Prime Minister since then, and even Nicola Sturgeon has fallen. What is going on? Why? And you can try and sort of attempt answers. In terms of the calibre of politician, that is a really interesting question. It's not nostalgic to suggest that there's been a decline in quality at the very top and amongst MPs more widely. And that will be a theme. See, each show is different at Edinburgh, and that will be one of the themes.
And could we say, I recently listened to a work you did on BBC Sounds on the with the 20th year since the death of Dr. David Kelly. You interviewed Andrew McKinley, who was an MP for Thurrock, and I'm an editor of Your Thurrock and Your Harlow, which has an MP called Robert Halfon, and both have been described as conviction politicians. So if we said the conviction politician is an endangered species, would you agree?
Well, I would put it slightly differently. They are both independent-minded politicians, and there aren't enough of them in this era. I'm a big fan of politicians who are troublemakers. In other words, more connected to their ideas and beliefs than solely about ambition and becoming ministers for the hell of it. And there aren't enough of those. And they are both examples of independent-minded politicians who have clear ideas or had clear ideas about what they believed in. And actually, that hasn't stopped Robert Halfon getting in. He's a minister now, isn't he?
Yes.
So it shows you can do it and still get on. And that was a lesson from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Quite a lot of the troublemakers got into the cabinet. And here you can root it very precisely. I think the rise of the New Labour period was so disciplined and controlling because in the 1980s, Labour was so split and lacking in discipline that this new kind of control over a parliamentary party became very intense. And it was quite difficult to be independent-minded and survive. But parties need them, and they need ideas, and they need to be challenged from within. And so those are two examples of it, both of them, one from the Labour Party and one from the Tory Party, who follow that model. But I think they would both agree there aren't enough of them in modern politics.
And for just two more questions. And as you will you be casting an eye to next year's general election? And again, should MPs, I pluck one out of the air like Robert Halfon in Harlow or wherever they're MP with a 14,000 majority, Conservative, should they be worried? What's your predictions?
Well, funnily enough, one of the things I ask of the audience is to make predictions for each show, and one of them will be for them to predict not what they hope will happen, but what they predict will happen at the next general election. And my prediction, but it's qualified, is this, that the polls are not so out of step. It suggests at the moment that Tory MPs in seats with majorities of under 20,000 have good cause to be worried. Look at the Selby by-election. However, there's still quite a long way to go before the next general election. And things can change. But obviously, on the basis of the moment, it feels like the end of a long period of one-party rule, which makes politics really interesting. Because when eras end, a whole range of new questions come up. Does Keir Starmer have the imagination to take us to a new era? What is it? These are some of the questions we'll be exploring at the Edinburgh Festival and, of course, in the podcast each week.
And brilliant. Well, Steve Richards, thank you very much, Time. I look forward to seeing you up in it.